if it wasn't for that shot, I don't think I would be sitting here today. And that's where you get even now I get a little bit of a cold shiver,
So how far away was this hippo from?
It was about 50 yards from us.
Sure, and they're quick.
Yeah, 60 k's an hour. I mean, it's not something you want to play with.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Hello and welcome to the Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin and I'm back with more skills and stories from the wild. Today we are recording in East London. That's not East London that I would normally think of in the UK, but East London is actually a city in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. It's about 11 hours drive from Cape Town, I think, something like that. I remember it being a long drive. I'm sat here with professional hunter and podcaster Dylan Love, which is a fantastic name.
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast, Dylan.
Oh, thanks, Robin.
So Dylan is actually flying over to the States today.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what are you heading over there for?
So we do the convention shows. Majority of them will be, based out of Dallas Safari Club, which was this weekend. Unfortunately, we missed it. It's my daughter's 5th birthday, so yeah, priorities at this point in my life.
Absolutely, yeah, a worthy priority.
Yeah, so but majority of the time now is just pretty much going over there, reconnecting with good old clients, and trying to reconnect with new clients. Trying to get new business into the industry and have people come out and experience our wonderful country as it is. So our main goal will be to go to SCR. We'll be going there, but just as a guest and just link up and show a bit of face.
Yeah. Nice.
Fun times.
Yeah. So how many years have you been going over for?
I started, my very first show was actually in, I want to say 2015. And I've missed 1 year, obviously, due to COVID since then.
Yes.
But been going over every single time, going over to all the main ones, Dallas Safari Club. We went to Harrisburg for a couple of years. That was fun. It's a different part of the US, in Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's more eastern side, right? Sure.
Okay. Yeah. And then now we base ourselves out of Arizona in Prescott, which is cool because it's a wonderful community and there's some good people around. So, during the week when there's not shows on, there's plenty to do. So yeah, I enjoy it.
Great, man. I mean, it's great that you're going over for a little while. It's gonna be a good laugh. And I hear you might be heading back over again soon. Yeah. So that's cool. I'm excited that you get to spend some time over there and experience the US and maybe some hunting as well. So for
sure, yeah. It's always nice to tick the bucket list off. One of my number one priorities on my bucket list has been an elk and bugling season, or in the rat season, archery. Yeah. So that's a big one. That's my goal. So I'm hoping in the next, maybe this year we can make it happen.
Fingers crossed, man. Yeah. I mean, I haven't yet experienced it, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.
They call it the poor man's elk hunting. I love hunting turkeys.
Okay.
Calling them. So I can only imagine when the turkey is 700 pounds and has giant antlers. Yeah. That's gonna be wild. So I've got lots of questions for you today, and we'll have to see how much time we have. But first of all, if you wouldn't mind, introducing, who you are and what you're all about, what you're passionate about. Just give us a quick, top line, you in a nutshell. Cool. And then we'll go from there.
So I'm Dylan Love, professional hunter out of the Eastern Cape. I'm licensed to hunt all over, but Eastern Cape's probably my more favourable. I'm from here, so I love it here. But in a nutshell, I started my hunting brand, PH Journals, back out in 2016. And hunting is my passion. I love hunting. I still feel it's the best form of conservation that we have to offer. Yeah. And I've started now with a small little outfitting company that operates out of the Eastern Cape, which is a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot. And
what's the name of the outfit?
Utanda Safaris, yeah.
Okay.
So love safaris in Xhosa, which has been fun. It's been a learning curve. But I think I've I've always, when I've started these things, I've never really had an end goal, which defeats the law of entrepreneurship, which
Yeah.
I've always believed in, but I just want to have fun. And that's why I do it. I just, the podcast, my PHing, there's no real intention to make a shit ton of money. There's always just that intention to have so much fun, So.
Man who speaks to my heart. But I think also, when Dylan's been very humble now, because in his pursuit of a good time, he's managed to really find some success, just a few little stats I have written down here. This, from what I'm understanding, from what I've heard, is the biggest podcast or hunting podcast in Africa as a continent as well, not just South Africa. So, I mean, congrats. Also, 2 million downloads you just hit recently, which is an amazing number. I can only dream of in the presence of greatness here.
Yeah.
So, congrats,
Thanks,
man. So maybe let's jump in to. I want to hear more about you and your story. Where did your kind of journey with hunting begin? Were you young? Was it part of the family? Who is it that sort of brought you under their wing and showed you how to hunt animals?
Yeah, so I think as I've grown older, I guess my story has kind of in a weird way motivated me more and more. So it's been one hell of an interesting ride, let me put it that way. From when I started, my dad, he fell terminally ill with cancer back in year 2000. I was 10 years old at the time, and we kind of we're a motorsport family, from my uncle, which I'll get into a little bit later. I mean, he won the South African off-road championship for 3 or 4 times. My dad was always up there first and second, and then from that transgressed into the motocross days, where myself and my brother did exceptionally well in the motocross scene, represented South Africa abroad, won a couple of championships. So we've always been a motorsport company. But when my dad when my dad fell ill, it became so difficult to upkeep that lifestyle, because we were constantly out every weekend, and with cancer, you go through those treatments, So, so our 13th birthday in South Africa is quite a big thing. And at the time, my uncle had purchased a cattle ranch just outside, or cattle farm outside Queenstown. And there was not much there. There was just obviously cattle, and then a herd of blessbuck. And he invited my dad out to bring me along for my 13th birthday for my very first animal. And we didn't have much out there. There was no shooting sticks or anything. And it was so much fun, and the process that day, the way it went down, I hold very, very dear to my heart. And it's something I live by every single day when I'm out hunting. And we from the stalk to when I took my first shot, which I missed, the buck fever overwhelmed me, to later that day having another opportunity with that animal being down. I'm sure you're aware of the blooding tradition that we do here in South Africa, where you smear your face full of blood and eat the liver. From that kind of molded me into this person that wanted to understand a little bit more about our primal instinct, being a hunter.
Yes.
And man, that just triggered me inside like nothing else has. And since that day, I mean, I've tried various different things, from becoming a professional rugby player to running a couple of businesses. And there's one thing that's always been so ingrained in me, and that's being a hunter, and a hunter for the right reasons, conservation and really diving into that primal instinct, which has always been so much fun, So, my career to date has been met with a lot of success, fortunately, but also a lot of controversy. I've had to battle my ways through the greenies, which we call them, the veggie people that don't enjoy the hunting side too much, to deteriorating relationships with my uncle and all that sort of stuff, which yeah, it's just part and parcel of what the industry throws at you, and I guess it's how you react to it. But one thing stays relevant, and the main thing that stays a goal in my life is conservation, because now being a father to a beautiful little 5-year-old,
Congratulations.
thank you. I want I want her to look back at the same species and animals that I've looked upon, which there are days where I lie in bed and I get cold shivers thinking that maybe sometimes those days aren't going to be around,
Yeah.
which is a scary thought. And people always say to me, it could be far into the distance, but I mean, you and I both know, as fast as things have been transgressing in the industry, it could be wiped out tomorrow if we really wanted to. So yeah, that's basically where everything started, and where it's going to now.
So I mean, I've got like a couple of questions from the things
Sure.
that you've just said. You said that like then from that moment that you were there, Blesbok, I think you said,
Yeah.
right? So Blesbok, how big is a Blesbok? It's
Probably, I would say it's about a white-tailed deer or antelope size.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
I think maybe slightly bigger than an antelope as well. Hey. I mean, at least the ones that I was chasing yesterday were.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, probably higher, but as far as body mass is concerned, I think an antelope packs a bit more pounds.
Okay, so that moment you're there, bloody face, first successful hunt, and that
Yeah.
really set you on your trajectory. Were you aware of like the role, like the job, the career of like a PH at that point, and had it at that point always been in your mind as like something that you could want to do, or was it something that you ended up going into a bit later?
So yeah, that's an interesting one. So I was 13 at the time, and at that stage, PHing and stuff was never really relevant to me. I was chasing girls and doing the teenage thing, but yeah. So where really actually is that moment of me shooting that animal and getting the opportunity to cut into it, take all the guts out, that's what really like changed my life. Was like, my dad was a fisherman. He loved fishing. So I always understood the fact that, I mean, I fished a lot with him, and still to this day I don't actually fish because it's a bit of a sentimental thing for me. But
Okay.
I always understood that kind of heartbeat to plate relationship you have with animals. And it was so interesting to me because that animal, that blazeback that I shot, had such a real feeling to it, exactly the same as what it was when we were gutting fish, filleting fish, frying them that night and eating them. Because what we did that day was, I gutted that animal, skinned the animal, we took out the back straps, we braid them, we did the whole thing. And that relationship with the wild really captivated me, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about it. And it just so happened to be on that exact farm there were Bushman paintings, and that kind of delved me into the primal instinct I really wanted to get into.
Yeah.
And it intrigued me. It intrigued me that we were put on this earth to really that we had to harvest these animals, not only just to eat them and enjoy them and look at them, but also to preserve them. And when I turned 19, I was playing rugby down in Natal, semi-professional, and I had an injury on my back, and I did quite a bit of research on it, and one of the things that they said was omegas was always a good way to regenerate your body and help you with the recovery and all that sort of stuff. And one of the high points that you could get from omega was in fish and in game. Obviously not as much, but it was one of those points. So I thought, well, I've got 6 weeks to go and do whatever I want now,
Yeah.
Let me go back to the farm and hunt. And that's when I really understood the fact that, wait, hang on, if I'm going to preserve this hunting, I need to understand a little bit more. And that's what really got me into professional hunting, was that I don't want to go out there and kill an animal every single day just so I could eat food,
Yeah.
I want to go out there and make sure that we're hunting the animals for the correct reason, but as well for understanding that this is what's going to provide us not only good nutrients, but it's also going to prolong those species. And that was the interesting thing for me, and that's where my life kind of took a turn. So in my break of injury, I kind of signed up for the professional hunting course. I was 19 at the time.
Wow.
And I did it, and I believe that so you can do your professional hunting course, but you can only be registered once you're 21.
Okay.
So I did it when I was 19, and I knew I had 3 years to get to a point where I was at my optimal amount, that I knew exactly what I needed to get out of professional hunting. And that's what I did. I mean, I did a lot of hunts with other professional hunters at the time, which was so much fun. By that point, my uncle had transferred to the cattle farm into a full-on blown game farm now. It was massive. We had 72 different species, so it was wild. So
Wow.
and I mean, he had. I mean, back then, I would say probably we were hunting at least 300 days of the year. It was just, that's how good it was, that place. So, and I was fortunate to be brought up in that environment because I learned so much, So by the time I was a registered professional hunter, which was in 2011, I knew exactly what my goal was. I knew what I wanted to get out of hunting, and I knew where I needed to go. So
Yeah.
I learned so much in that time. And it humbled me, but I think the thing that I hold on to and why I became a professional hunter was this primal instinct, is this instinct inside of us just to hunt, but hunt for the good reason of feeding us, looking after for the future.
Yeah, it's feeding yourself, but also preserving the
For
way
sure.
in which you will feed yourself in the future.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so becoming a professional hunter isn't the easiest thing to do, if I understand. You've got to go through like testing and like, you've got to pass certain qualifications. Is that right?
Yeah, look, it's not the easiest, and I guess it's not the most difficult because it's only at this point it's only a 10-day course, which is cool.
Okay.
But I firmly believe, and in a lot of other countries, there's points where you have to. You can become a professional hunter, but you have to do X amount of time, pretty much like an apprenticeship, a couple of months.
Okay.
So for us, it's a short course. It's not easy. I didn't think it was the easiest thing at all, but it's short and it's effective and it gets the job done. But I would like to, if I could add in, I would like to see it, have that apprenticeship at the end of it, that you'll have to have a book where you sign.
Yes.
Because you did X amount of.
So that doesn't exist right now, but you
No.
think it should.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing. As a young professional hunter, when I started out, like I said, I was fortunate in having this opportunity to hunt on a regular basis. So we had a lot of Europeans that came out, and they're not trophy hunters as such. And I think one of the biggest pressure points as a professional hunter is the outfitter putting pressure on you to finish packages.
Yes.
And so you've got to tick all these boxes. If it's a trophy hunter, we'll get in. I'm sure you're gonna want to chat a bit about the trophy hunting side. But if you're a trophy hunter, you go. What does that mean to you as a professional hunter? But if you're hunting the European packages, they normally take like skull mounts and stuff. So
Yes.
you're not really looking for the biggest, baddest animal. You're just shooting an immature animal that they're happy to do a bit of a skull mount on the wall or something. So
Yeah.
So for me, when I started in 2011, for my first 2 years, those were all the hunts I was doing, was the Europeans, the British, the French, all that sort of stuff. So it didn't put me under immense amount of pressure, and I managed to learn. So if I look back at the course now, and if you're a young 20-year-old professional hunter that's just done the course, to tell the difference between a female and a male blue wildebeest, it could get quite daunting at a time, especially in a pressure situation.
Yeah, I had it yesterday.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is once they do those hunts, those smaller hunts or those apprenticeship hunts, it will ease them into the bigger roles at a later stage. So I think that from a conservation point of view, I think that is such an important part in the course that can be added, because now they're not just shooting a young, good-looking bull; they're shooting the older, mature, because they understand a little bit more about
Right.
it. Yeah.
You've really got to make the right decision
For
before
sure.
pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
That's interesting as well, and this is a bit of a sidestep, but you're saying like the Europeans come over and do that, and this is something, forgive me because I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I mean, but do you think a cultural difference that more Europeans want to come over and hunt, but they're not so worried about like the biggest, meanest, baddest thing? They're more interested in the experience of going and hunting, or what do you think the motivation is?
So, my experience with Europeans is that there's a lot of good traditional hunters out there.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, my experience with the Spanish, with the European wild boars. I mean, when I hunted in Spain last year in October, that tradition for me was unbelievable. Like we did I forget what they call it, Montreal. That's it. Like a big driven hunt. You stand in stands.
Yes.
Not my cup of tea at all.
Yeah.
But boy, did I have fun. And the cool thing about that is that I've hunted Spanish people now for 7 years. I come over, do one Montreal, and now I understand the past 7 years of why hunting warthog and the way they hunted it was so important to them, and the way they did it, shoving the leaf in the last meal, shoving the leaf in the lips and all that sort of stuff. So I think from a European perspective, the British always say to you that they want skull mounts because I don't think the houses there are very big, so they don't have space. So they'll always say to me, they'll say, no, just do a skull mount, just do a European. But whereas I see a lot of especially that Spain hunt that we went on, a lot of them do the cool thing and they make a little plaque underneath it. And so I think it's just something that's been inbred into their tradition, and I think it's pretty cool. I think, South Africa is so, from a hunting perspective, is so rich in culture as it is, just with our local hunters, from biltong hunters to bow hunters to trophy hunters, and then to the collectors, and then you bring in this wide variety of different hunters, from Europeans to the Americans, and now even the South Americans. We're getting a lot of Argentinian interest and stuff. They've brought that culture now over to us. And it's up to us now to embrace that, because they all have this part in this. I like to call it this fake ecosystem that we've created as South African hunting industry. So they bring such a valuable part to it, so which is very exciting. So yeah, so I don't know why.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to what we were kind of talking about before. Thank you for the sidestep.
Cool, no.
So the life as a PH, I mean, I'm imagining it's the same as being a hunting guide in the US. It's potentially long hours, and also I'm guessing you predominantly are in the Eastern Cape, or did you end up doing quite a lot of travel around the rest of South Africa and other countries as well?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I mean, I did majority of my hunting was done here, but I did a lot. Yeah, I did a lot up in Limpopo. I went to Zimbabwe a few times. I've never hunted Namibia, which I might get the opportunity to do this year, which I'm excited about. And then I hunted Tanzania and Zambia, which was also cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Another guest on the show, Fred Hammer, he just got back from a trip in Zambia and said it was unbelievable. Yeah. And yeah, for the things he's told me, hopefully I can get him back on the bottom. We'll talk about that. But anyway, that's a side note. So I always like to ask some of these questions like this. But so being a professional hunter, you're out in the field a lot. You see a lot of stuff. Are there any close calls or moments where you've just moments of note, really, like wild encounters, be they with animals or people?
Yeah.
Stuff where you're just afterwards you're that was hectic, or that was a moment,
So there's actually two that come to mind, and the one was for an animal you wouldn't expect to get into a situation of danger. But so we a bow hunter now. When I guide bow hunters, that it's that last 100 yards that they've got to close, that I kind of give them the space to do what they need to do. Because I think especially what I've learned now, every bow hunter has a different way of approaching animals. And if I look at myself as a professional hunter, my obligation to that hunt is to get them into the best possible position. and then give them the opportunity on the best animal that I bring. So anyway, we're hunting zebra, and this client of mine's been hounding me the whole trip. I mean, we've had a phenomenal trip. We've shot kudu, we've shot impala, warthogs. It's a 7-day safari, and normally for bow hunters, I try and tell them to come on like 10 to 12 days because it just gives you that little bit more time. But on a 7-day safari, he's done exceptionally well. He's closed the gap well and stuff. So anyway, we get onto this herd of zebra, and for some reason, this big male stallion singles himself out to the back, and there's a herd. So anyway, he's crawling, he's closing this last bit of 100 yards, and it's myself and my tracker, we're sitting back and we're watching this whole thing go down.
Yeah.
And it's in very tall, long, dry grass. Closes it, he puts in a perfect shot. But they do a complete full circle, so he has about a 30-yard shot.
Yes.
He drills it, perfect shot, the stallion takes off one way. But the herd does a complete circle and heads straight for him. And I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, we go. This is, I mean, we're talking about maybe about 20 to 30 head of zebra.
And they're just charging.
They're going straight for him.
And a zebra is like 1,000-pound animal.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're not aware of it. I mean, it's a horse. They're not
Yeah.
aware that he's there because he's lying down now. He's pulled off the shot. It's a great shot. He's lying down in the grass waiting for everything to settle. He's watching the stallion, and meanwhile this herd's turned around and they're heading straight for him.
Oh.
And all we see is dust, and you know, it's a blur from there. And we wait for everything to kind of settle. The tracker watches the stallion drop, and I'm just focused now on Mark, who's pulled off the shot, and I'm watching and I'm watching and watching, and I see no movement. I can see the top of his backpack, but I can see no movement. So anyway, and it's an Australian guy. So anyway, so like, yes, I'm thinking the worst. So I back around, we go up and we fetch a truck because now I want to be prepared, because I don't want to be on foot when I'm there if he's injured. I want to be with my truck there so that we can load him immediately.
Yes.
So I back around, fetch a truck, he moves out of line of sight. I get down to him and he's just sitting there and he's as white as a ghost. And he goes, "Oh mate, how was that?" I was like, "Oh Mark, you've had me stressed like you can't believe." And he's like, "Oh, what an adrenaline rush." I'm like, "Yes." So that was one of the calls that I was just like, I do not want that to happen again, because you know that could have been disaster. And then the other one was probably one of my most hair-raising experiences. We had the opportunity down on the Fish River. I'm sure you drove over it on your way.
Yeah.
There's wild hippo in those rivers, so there's these different pods of hippo, and once a year, it's the national government, they put out these proclamations that you can tender on permits to hunt these hippo in the river, because they're becoming a bit of a problem. So just a quick brief history. South Africa was divided into two different countries previously in apartheid. So this forms part of the Ciskei, whereas there's a lot of rural settlements along the banks of these rivers. So they never really had resources to get down there, put up big establishments, like homes and stuff. So they walk down by foot to these lands. They plant by hand or with cattle.
The people who live in the area.
Who live in the area.
Okay.
And they harvest with cattle. So the only the only source of water is from the river. They've got to somehow pump it up and water their veggie gardens over there.
Okay.
So essentially these hippo see it as like a candy store. So
Huh.
you know, and hippo often they move a lot at night. So anyway, we had this opportunity to hunt. Now, on the permit it said it had to be a male hippo. So we single out this male hippo, and the reason why we were there is that unfortunately 2 weeks prior, the maize corn is so high, the corn.
Yes.
And 2 little boys that were going down to the river to fish, and they didn't know, but they walked straight into this hippo. And obviously one of them lost their life. So we had the opportunity to go down and hunt this rogue bull that was causing a bit of, trouble in the area.
So it's a hippo that's shown aggressive behaviour.
Yeah.
But
So
also hippo are known as some of the most dangerous animals in the world.
the most
right?
dangerous in Africa, which
Okay.
so it's wild. So I mean, you get down there, you don't have a truck, everything's on foot. It's pretty much hunting like the rural ends of Zambia.
Mm.
And you can see these big slides into the river where these animals are accessing the banks, and it's daunting because you can see, I mean, only a couple of feet in front of you. It's thick vegetation. You know, the only time you get open is in the lands,
Yes.
and even that's hair raising because the corn's so high
Yes.
that you don't know what you're going to be walking into. So anyway, we had this fortunate opportunity to get down there, and I knew that you wanted to be away because one of the most dangerous points you can be is encountering a hippo is between the hippo and the water.
Yes.
So if you're in between that,
that's their escape route.
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to be as far away from those slides into the river as possible, you know, for order us to try and set up some sort of hunt to, number one, locate these animals, and number two, actually get a shot off. So anyway, we get down to the riverbanks and we see, first day, we see this hippo. And he's massive. He's a nice big old bull. Around his eye sockets are just like milky, how he's lost deterioration in pigment around his eyes. So he's just got so much character, and you can see he's been through a lot. So it's so much fun. So we get down, we locate it. 7 days later, we get another opportunity to pull off a shot. So now we've been going to and from for 7 days.
Sure.
But the way we managed to pull off a shot is that we walked out. We were going to call it a day because I don't want to be there between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. because that's when they're going to start moving.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it becomes dangerous. So at 4 o'clock, I make a call. I'm like, guys, we're not going to do this anymore. And we perch ourselves up onto this little grass embankment just before one of the lands, and this hippo stares us straight in the face at about 40 yards from us. And at the time it was Jared. I said, and thank God for his quick thinking. And it could have turned very ugly because it could have been a female that was there.
Yes.
But it was that bull that we were after.
Okay.
And he managed to put in a shot. And it ran off, hit one of those slides, and then eventually floated up later.
Floated, okay.
But if it wasn't for that shot, I don't think I would be sitting here today. And that's where you get even now I get a little bit of a cold shiver, you know.
So how far away was this hippo from
It was about 50 yards from us.
Sure,
you know,
and they're quick.
Yeah, 60 k's an hour. I mean, it's not something you want to play with. So, you know, and also, you know, it's massive, so it can run through pretty much everything. When you're standing on this, I want to call it by 6 foot or about 3 meter by 3 meter wide platform or like little embankment, and all you've got is thick vegetation to your side, they can run through pretty much everything. I mean, they're just gonna tear you apart. But yeah, the good man above was on my side that day, and Jared's quick thinking just really just put everything to bed. But I mean, we got home that night, and you know, it was, as much as it was a celebration, and none of us actually got hurt. So
I can only imagine. Did you find afterwards, you know, like, were you having dreams of hippos charging you out? Like, you know, was there a bit of mental?
Yeah, you know, that's one of the big things is PTSD with something like that. I mean, a friend of mine, he had a close encounter with a lion as well, and you know, we often talk about it, and it has a massive effect on you because you often, you know, you're always referring back to that situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it makes you wiser, let's put it that way.
I can only imagine, man. Yeah. So, I think it's good. There's a few things that I wanted to like pick your brains about today, because I'm lucky enough to spend time living in South Africa each year. I think of it as living. My wife is South African. We're usually here for 3-ish months of the year. Okay. So I have this like perspective of the American way of like hunting and how that works, and then there's, you know, the South African way of doing things, and also obviously I grew up in England, so I have like a little bit of that perspective as well, which is very regal and very different a way that hunting works over there. But there's a few things that I wanted to talk about with you, but you know, one of those is conservation. Another one, like you just touched on there, is like mental health. You know, I think that's something that's really that you're passionate about. So we can talk about that too. And then if we have time at the end, I'd love to talk a bit about the world, like as we covered a bit already, the kind of the world of trophy hunting and that whole fun conversation topic.
Yeah.
But first, you mentioned in your intro, you're super passionate about conservation. If you can just tell me, how conservation works in South Africa, and then also, how that arc has gone, like how it maybe was and what it became and what it is now. If there has been a change or a journey with that with conservation here.
My biggest thing with conservation is that there's been so many influential people into preserving species and hunting regulations in South Africa that we sit in a fortunate, now more than ever so before, we sit in a very fortunate position where we can kind of link so many different countries and how they do it, how the UK do it, how the US do it, and how South Africa do it, and come to an agreement and say, okay, well, this is going to be our best model.
Okay.
What I find is detrimental to conservation is that we've broken off into these different segments. In the States, you've got the different states and how they perceive things.
Yes.
Of course, I'm not veering away from how management should happen there. I mean, for instance, if you're in Arizona and there's more pronghorn there, then sure, hunt more pronghorn than you would in California, whatever, So I'm not slating that. I'm just saying there needs to kind of be like a blanket rule to everything. And it's the same in South Africa, is that we've got so many different conservation models, and all of them have got such great key factors in them and have done exceptional work within them. So I want to get into, for instance, probably one of the greatest conservation stories South Africa has is the black wildebeest, right?
Okay.
And that seems to be the basic one of it. Is that so South Africa would be the black wildebeest would probably be the greatest conservation story I think South Africa has from a broad perspective. So
okay.
In the early 19s, I'm sure you know the story, the black wildebeest was almost eradicated because they had no value, right? They had no value to the cattle farmers, they had no value to the sheep farmers, they were just destroying land, because black wildebeest, they turn land around, they try and flatten the grass. Yeah, well, they just run, I mean, you'll see them, they run big circles, they try and flatten their habitat as much as possible so predators don't crawl up on them and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. So that's why they call the clowns of the bush, because they just keep circling. I mean, if you want to hunt a black wildebeest, they say all you need to do is sit still and act like an anthill, and you'll have the greatest success. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Until the hunters actually started coming in and valuing that animal at a certain amount of dollars, whatever it may be, the farmers started realizing, well, hang on, if I keep a X amount of herd during the hunting period months of South Africa, I can actually get a good income from, and it keeps my cash flow going.
Yes.
So that's probably one of the other one is the Oribi. Now the Oribi is an interesting one because...
Well, I just want to go back. So,
yeah.
So the product of that change in perspective meant that the black wildebeest went from being like decimated to, and now it's
thriving.
It's thriving.
It's thriving. I mean, I think I don't want you to hold it to me, but
okay.
I think it went from almost 3,000 head to almost about 140,000 where we are now today of black wildebeest, which is incredible. And that's all just the perspective of that specific animal.
Yes.
That animal has a value now.
Yes.
It gets to stick around. It's on top of 90% of the hunting packages out there. It owns its market. It's part of the TOPS permit species. So TOPS, you have to kind of nature conservation come out to your farm. Mm-hmm. They assess what's going on there. They assess the healthiness of your herd, and they'll issue a TOPS permit book where you can apply for a permit when you come out and hunt, which is great.
Yeah.
The other flip of the spectrum is you get the Oribi now. Now the Oribi is limited, especially the southern Oribi. Now northern country, the northern territories in South Africa and Africa, like Limpopo and upwards, they've got an abundance of these little critters. Whereas in South Africa, the southern side, especially in the Eastern Cape, just down the road, Port Alfred, they've got a rich concentration of Oribi. But those Oribi would have been decimated if it wasn't for a few guys that had their fingers on the pulse.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, go for it.
But I actually don't know what an Oribi is.
Okay.
So I'm assuming maybe I'm the only idiot out in the world who's never heard of one of these. But what's an Oribi? But also there's another question as I'm in the process of interrupting you. So the way that it actually works in South Africa, just for people who maybe might not know, because there's some people listening who aren't necessarily coming from like in the thick of hunting. Obviously in the US there is a tag system, and that's the kind of thing where it's controlled by scientists. They look at populations and tags are issued, which when you own a tag you then can hunt one of those animals.
Yes.
But it's based on the idea that the government in the US owns all the animals, even if it's on someone's private property.
Okay, yeah.
It's different in South Africa, right?
Sure. So if that animal is on your property, that essentially is your property.
Okay.
There are, and I think it's more of just like a Good Samaritan law, that if you are in the, if you got a game farm and you got sable, and your sable get out to your neighbor's farm, and he's a cattle farmer, he's got 6 months to either come and fetch his sable, or that farmer's entitled to own the animal.
To be eating sable burgers.
So it's like this weird thing, and I think that's why like conservation for me in South Africa has worked. Look, for the majority of it, it's worked incredibly well.
Yes.
But I do feel that there's so many ways we can better it to become this hub of conservation success stories. So
Okay.
So getting back to the Oribi, I mean,
Yes.
the Oribi it's a short little antelope. It's got it's very, very similar to a steenbok, long straight horns.
Is it on the Tiny 10?
Yes, it's on the tiny 10.
Okay.
It's a great animal, and although they normally stick around in pairs or like 3 or 4 in a group, and they like the open countryside more than the thick desert, dense bush area. But they were almost eradicated, but just purely from local poachers. Guys in the township with the dogs going in. And the minute that animal became valuable to the farmer and to the guys within the farming community, the staff and all that sort of stuff, they realized that they could actually generate, or the farmer would reimburse them for looking after these animals. So they took away the snares, they took away the hunting with the dogs, they took away all these things, because they wanted to look after this animal, because it's highly, highly priced at the moment. I mean, I think to hunt an Oribi, I will stand on a correction, but probably you're looking in the region of $4,000 just for a little animal,
Wow.
But it adds so much value because there's only 6 permits available in this area. There's only 6. And it's become a sought after trophy. So that conservation story works, and it really holds its own, and it's part of the reason why it's such a success today. But if you look from going on now, we're sitting with a situation, especially in this London area here, and it's not common knowledge, because a lot of farmers have kept it under wraps. But our leopard population in this area has grown immensely.
Okay.
There's stories of guys coming into counters with the bush pig, with the dogs. But nature conservation refuses to acknowledge that and see it as a problem, because our regulations on leopard in South Africa are so tightly strung now, because there's only, I think, 2 or 3 permits a year that you get to hunt, and that's only up in the north.
Okay.
So what I'm scared is going to start happening is that our leopard population, although it started to be on the incline, it can very, very quickly start becoming on the decline again, because people are going to hunt these things and not tell anyone about them, because they're damaging their cattle stocks, their sheep stocks, their goat stocks. And to get rid of a leopard's pretty easy nowadays, Whereas you put a value on that leopard at $20,000 to $30,000, it reimburses that farmer for a loss of 6 or 7 cattle, So you take that away from him, you're taking away his income. He has to do with what the problem is, and that's the leopard. So that conservation story needs some sort of assistance. Somebody needs to take control of that and say, well, hang on here. What is the good for this certain species? And that's this brings me back to my point, is where I say is that there's not this blanket effect. Everything gets dealt with individually, which I think becomes an issue. And my goal from a conservation standpoint was say is that, guys, we've got a problem with leopard. Population is coming up. We need somebody there. Let's come up with a plan. Let's issue some permits and let's get the problem solved. Because if we can look after our population of leopard, not only does it do wonders for our tourism side, in the Eastern Cape, but number two is preserving a species that has been eradicated from this area. We're bringing it back, and now we get to look after it, and the farmers get to benefit off of it.
Yeah.
So for me, that is probably the most important thing of it. I mean, there's different ways we can go about it, and there's different ways we can see it, but from a blanket point of view, I don't think there's enough of those conversations being happened, and that's my goal, and that's what I've always wanted from my podcast, from my YouTube, is that to have these conversations, to see how we can get involved and be better at doing what we're doing, because we are doing a great job.
That's good to hear.
Especially, I think it goes unsaid. I mean, I'm on an anti-poaching group just for dogs, which is one of our biggest problems in our area.
So that's, when you say for dogs, it's poachers using dogs to catch
hunt, yeah. But it's become like a syndicate now, so there's big money involved, and I mean that's a whole nother thing on its own. But the work that our government is doing on that is incredible.
Okay.
They've really eradicated a lot of the issue that we've had. They've brought it down a hell of a lot, which is great. It's great, but I think as hunters, as individuals, there's a lot of these game farmers that stand up at these presentations now at Dallas Safari Club and SCI, and they receive all these awards for all the good work they've done, but done within their little group, within their property. We need to broaden that, and I can't do it alone. Yes. Financially, it's too much, but as a group, I'm sure you've seen it when you've come into the hunting industry. We break off into these different factions, and the bow hunters have got their side, the rifle hunters have got their side, and as a whole, we're all striving for the same goal, but we all see things differently. And it's the same in the hunting industry, as outfitters, PHs, conservationists. We all want the same thing.
Yes.
But we're so disconnected at the moment, and I just wish everything was at one.
I can imagine that there is an element of that in every industry. There's the nuances. People have they like to be with their like-minded individuals, don't they? But so what you're saying is finding some way of getting everyone, if there was a way of connecting everyone more, so that it was a more collaborative effort towards an actual common goal that everyone has.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one other question for you. I just wanted to talk about the leopards, because it's interesting, the story you're saying about the leopards and the conservation, potential future conservation issue that happens. I never knew that could be a thing. That obviously, I never thought about the fact that obviously farmers are going to take matters into their own hands, and that's a thing to try and avoid by adding value. That's a really interesting thing that I didn't know about. But is there also a difficult aspect to getting, legislation is the word, I guess, but getting laws made or getting that moving forward because of the contentious nature of cats and predators and hunting those animals? Yeah.
So that's I guess that's the broader perspective of it, and I guess I call it the Cecil Lion effect. So when Cecil the lion was...
Tell me about Cecil the lion, because I've heard a little about it, but maybe...
there's so many different stories about it, but the gist of it is that this dentist or whatever he was from the US came out and hunted a lion that was collared up in Namibia.
Oh.
And it was a lion that they had been tracking on a reserve. They came over into a hunting area, and they ultimately took this lion, and he had to close his practice. The backlash he got from it was now these people had this ammunition. So essentially, since that day, they closed all lion hunting in South Africa. So you can't hunt a lion here unless you go through certain requirements. I think your property's got to be X amount of acres or hectares. I think it's 6,000. I want to stand on a correction on that. But you've got to go through all these rigmaroles. Ultimately, it's done more harm to the lion population than it ever has I mean, for a farmer now to keep a pride of lions on his property, which a lot of farmers were doing at the time, because it was a great tourist attraction. So it was a great. What a lot of people don't realize is that the zoos aren't. They need a way to control their population, but they also needed a way to make an extra bit of income.
Their lion population.
No, well, so a zoo would need an extra bit of income, right?
Yes.
Because they wouldn't be full constantly.
Okay.
And they found out that they could have this income by selling lion cubs. So breeding the lion, becoming like a breeding factory. And these farmers, they were buying them in at cheap. They were easy to maintain because it's captive bred lion. So they were putting them in these massive enclosures, and it was great for tourism. It was great. And this is why I say we've created this ecosystem, us as humans, and not any particular group, not the hunters, not the Greenpeace people, not our politicians. Us as human beings have created this ecosystem. We've got to manage it now. So whether you're seeing that lion through a fence, or whether you're seeing it out in the open, we've still created that. We've still forced an enclosement of the Kruger Park. We've still put a fencing, a border around the Kruger Park.
Is that?
We need to control that.
Yeah.
The Kruger and the Rangers, they've got to put out how many elephants. I mean, they still do culling in the Kruger Park. It's not an environment that's self-sustaining. There's got to be some sort of human intervention.
Some management.
Yeah, there has to be. And what Cecil did is he's taken that all away. So whereas you could drive from East London to Johannesburg and drive and see 7 different lions, prides of lions all over the show. I think now if you see 2, you're lucky. Which in a way it's sad, because now you've taken away from something that was never really meant to be there in the first place, like your zoos and stuff, but you've taken it away, and now you're forcing something to be false, I guess, if it makes it sense. But yeah, so what Cecil did is it closed the lion population. The lions are being sold off at rapid rates, or being slaughtered, being euthanized, because it's just become too expensive, because now that attraction to coming to see a lion is no more. And I think in the next 5 years, I estimate, we will probably won't see a wild lion in South Africa, because they're a predator. They do damage to livestock. They do damage to animals. That's what they do. That's their instinct.
So you think it's going to be the same issue as the potential thing that could happen with the leopard?
Yeah.
Here is that farmers will just take care of the lion if they are hungry and nearby, if there isn't proper management.
Yeah. So we've got to look after as much as what we've been given, but also created, and that's a difficult one for me. It's really, really difficult. I hate to see any sort of legislation put out there that an animal can't be hunted, because I believe any animal can be hunted, regardless of the endangered species. Because as a hunter, I'm going to try my level best to preserve that animal as best as I possibly can. But how do I do that? By adding value to it. And if you don't have value, there's no incentive to preserve these animals for anyone. And that's what makes it so difficult, is that the polar bear, for instance. I mean, the minute they close hunting on polar bear, it will decimate, not global warming, but it will decimate that population, because they're destroying the seal population by, well, not destroying it, but they're hunting seals on a constant basis, and they're taking food out of, I don't think I'm allowed to call them Eskimos, but out of the local people
Indigenous people.
Yeah, you're taking food away from them by having a polar bear there, because a polar bear will kill 2 seals in a matter of days, whereas a local would only be able to afford to kill 1 seal a day, or have the necessary ability to kill 1 seal. So there's this constant competition between wildlife and human beings, and how do we monitor it? We've got to put value on the wildlife, and until we do that, I'm afraid we're fighting a losing battle.
It does sound like a very complicated and difficult thing to maneuver. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I don't really, I mean, as I said before, I wish I had my own point of view at the moment, but I'm still forming things, and that's part of what this podcast is about, is talking to lots of people and learning and hearing perspectives, and so thanks for sharing that and informing me as well.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear. Is there anything else about conservation that you want to share, or?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously mine, it's a personal opinion to me, and again, it's something I think we're very bad at as hunters, is actually listening to people and understanding. It's something I learned very, very quickly in my career, was that I always wanted the older PHs, when they would always tell their stories around camp or offer you advice. I was the arrogant 19-year-old that came in, you don't know, maybe we should do it this way better. But I learned very, very quickly that those old people, those old professional hunters, were talking from knowledge and understanding and experience. And I think as a hunting community, I think we don't listen enough to one another. And I think if we can be better in doing that, I think our industry will live to tell a tale for a very, very long time. But until that happens, until these conversations happen, nothing really spectacular is going to be done. We're just going to keep fighting these losing battles. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, our conservation models are fantastic. From conservancies to tops to CITES to everything across the board. I think we're doing an exceptional job, but I do think we can be better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, well then with that, maybe let's move on to the next thing I'd love to pick your brains about. Mental health. Now, when we were talking a bit beforehand, you said that it's something that you're really passionate about, and I'd love to just hear more about what the whole spectrum of what that involves, and your thoughts, feelings, everything in that world.
Yeah, so mental health, my journey with mental health, actually, let me put it this way, I didn't realize it, but it actually started back in 2017. So one of my goals as professional hunters to date, the divorce rate is up by, I think it's 85% of all professional hunters get divorced.
Wow.
Yeah, and then another thing was, I think it is about 75% of all professional hunters don't make a steady income enough to sustain a family from freelance professional hunting. And that was always something that interested me and intrigued me, and I said, well, the reason why I started PH Journals was because I was just attacked online from the Greenpeace people, and I just decided, I don't need this on my personal stuff, let me start PH Journals. But I needed something to work towards. So of course conservation was at the top of the agenda, and secondly was to try and remold the professional hunting output and what they give out. And one of them is that I wanted to understand why the divorce rate was so high, and why youngsters coming into the industry couldn't make a sustainable living for a family. So that was the bigger, broader perspective on it. And 27, me and my ex-wife to date, we were best friends since the age of 5. We were best friends. And from 2012 we started dating, and we got married in 2017, and in 2019 my daughter was born. But 2017 I fell into a very dark slump, and I didn't realize it at the time, and I guess that's what mental health does. It puts you into the space where you feel uncomfortable, but you actually don't realize you're going into a dark hole. But And I was one of those guys, pretty much like David Goggins or Andrew Tate, like, fuck this shit, I'm going to get out of it, I'm hard, and I got to a point in my life where I actually wasn't making a sustainable living to upkeep this new family now that I've created.
Yeah.
So come 2020 with COVID, I mean, that hits your socks completely out, Not a single drop of income. You're living off government grant. You don't really know where you want to turn. And I think one of the things I learned in that year was that sustainability as a man for family is incredibly important. And it keeps the glow, and it keeps the passion enlightened in a relationship, regardless of whatever you guys may be going through.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate. My wife at the time, she was so invested into my career. She was, we could see the growth from on my PH Journals pages, from the podcast. We could see the growth constantly, but there was no tangible amount of support or income coming in that we could sustain this. And unfortunately, it led to a lot of hard conversations, and it led to a lot of fighting and a lot of arguments, and my wife couldn't take it, and we ultimately got divorced. But in 2021, I needed, after my incredible season, I hunted 225 days, I made a good lot of money. I needed to realize, and I needed to understand that why did this happen? So fast forward a couple of months, I decided, well, the only way I'm going to do that is to experience this, or to explore this mental health challenges that I had at the time, because I wasn't myself. I mean, I had lost my wife. I was struggling with seeing my daughter only a few times a week. So I booked myself into a mental institute, and I really, at that point, I understood, well, I'm going to this institution to do one thing, and that was learn about what it is that I'm going through. And when I got there the very first day, the psychologist sat in front of me and they said, you're depressed, you've got depression. And again, referring back to Andrew Tate and Goggins, and I was like, oh, fuck this shit, man, they don't know what they're talking about. But the more I got into it, the more I realized that, well, hang on, I've got to understand this. I have to realize, like, where did this come from? Where is it going? And what can I take from this? Because depression is like a omen, right? I mean, everyone looks at it and says, oh, well, kind of, it's an embarrassing thing.
Oh yeah, the stigma.
Yeah, the stigma behind it. And so I went to this institution. I was there for 4 weeks. Brilliant institution up in Underberg. And I came to the terms with, I had depression. But the challenge for me was not to understand that, can I go back and fix things, or do I keep going forward? And I think one of the most important things for me was, once I left there, was to understand that I can only go forward from here. If I'm going to go back, there's a high risk possibility that I could slip into a very dark place. But I need to go forward. And I think the way that ties into where I sit now and what I do with PH Journals and professional hunting and stuff, is that I still believe us as professional hunters, we can better that statistic about the divorce rate. And we can definitely have a platform for professional hunters where they can make a little bit more income. Because I think there's a lot more professional hunters out there that suffer from depression than what we like to think. But like you said, the stigma behind it is just so overwhelming that people get labeled out there. And I think when I look back at it, and when I want to go forward, is my biggest moment that I realize as a depressant is that I have to be honest with myself. And it can, and one of the coolest things that I realized is that it can be beaten. I was diagnosed with depression in 2022. As we speak right now, in the next month, I will go off all medication. as far as depression and all that sort of stuff's concerned. But it's testament to the hard work that I've had to put in and understand. But also it's testament to the fantastic people I've surrounded myself with, and an industry that's given back so much to me, you know. And this one of the lessons that I learned, like I said earlier, is to listen to the older generation. Because when I went through this dark space, they were the first people I turned to. And not one of them actually judged me on any of it, because I think they realized, or they knew what they had experienced.
Yeah.
So we created this community, and that's what was so beautiful about it, was that this hunting community's come together in support of, at the time, which only felt like me, but I think our conversations together helped everyone, and that was so rewarding at that point. So yeah, so my mental health, I'm very, very passionate about it. It doesn't look like it, but I've signed up this year. I'll be doing the Ironman in Mossel Bay.
Amazing.
Yeah, the half Ironman. So I'm shitting myself for that, but I'm really excited. And then a good friend of mine, Drew, down at Royal Karoo, they've started also part of the mental health thing. They've started David Goggins Challenge. That's on the 1st of March, so I'll be doing that. And all of this is to raise awareness, because I want as many hunters and professional hunters to talk, because everyone's got a story, but it's who you share that story with that can make all the difference.
Oh, absolutely.
And I strongly believe that us as professional hunters, we've got a future in this industry, and we can make it work. So I guess that's where the mental health side of things really turns in, and this,
yeah,
being a PH gives back so much.
Well, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, like, thank you for being so open with that response. I mean, like, the bravery that you are like showing now to talk so openly about these things anyway. But also, I just have, like, I can imagine from the perspective of someone who also has experienced depression, the bravery to be able to make that change and actually put yourself in in an institution for a period of time and be brave enough to learn those lessons and know that you need to learn some new skills in order to work with what you're dealt when that happens, when those dark moments can happen. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, like, well done is not the right expression, but you get my sentiment.
Yeah,
right?
no, for sure.
It's definitely something which the stigma, it's there, and I think the stigma exists in a world outside of professional hunting, the hunting world, and that's the thing that's kind of bizarre, is that it's a world where masculinity and strength is like in the front window of hunting, and so I can only imagine, and this is speculation, but I can only imagine that there are so many guys out there who are trying to project the big tough guy image.
Well, that's I like to say this often. I mean, I say it often in the hunting industry. There's always a place for things that we create. There's always a place for the way we perceive things, and there's always a place for how people interpret different things. The things that Andrew Tate and David Goggins do with the whole tough man mentality, it does work. It works for certain amount of people, and it works really, really well. Breaks them out of those molds. It gets them to a point where they feel motivated and strong again, and my brother's a testament to one of that. I don't think he was ever in depression, but it motivates him. It gets him going. I mean, last year he did three half Ironmans. He was incredible. He's an absolute beast. So for me, that there's always a place for that, but there's also a place for empathy. There's also a place for a soft approach to the whole thing. And I think there's not enough of that, because, like you said, as men, we don't like to show weakness. We don't like to show vulnerability.
No.
And it was one of the hardest things I think I ever had to overcome, was, besides being honest with the fact that I've got depression, being vulnerable was one of the hardest things. Because
absolutely.
to sit in front of another man and be able to cry and let your emotions out, it's a very overwhelming, humbling, but also daunting experience. It really is, and it's. I wouldn't change anything for the life of me right now. A lot of people say, would you go back and try and fix things with your ex-wife? No, because that's made me who I am today. That experience has made me a better man for my daughter, has made me a better man to become a better professional hunter, and just generally for my family. It's been, as much as we'll always look back at those memories and reminisce and understand that those were very, very special times. But that's what it is now. It's special times, it's special memories. You can't go back and recreate. Now you start and create new things, create new memories with new possibilities. I've got a beautiful girlfriend now. She supports me on what I'm doing. She's wonderful. She's coming over to the States with me because I don't like paperwork, so I'm bringing somebody. But that's what you've got to embrace. You've got to embrace the future. You've got to embrace what now you've got to pave. And I always say being diagnosed with depression is not. It's not a handicap, but it's a privilege because I'm sure you're aware of it, but you dive so deep within your mind, and you learn so much from yourself. That is so important for the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's as you said, it can be very hard to even see your own emotional. It's not regression, but like the slippery slide.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a skill to learn, and that's something which I guess we can all continue to work on.
Yeah.
But also, my wife has been like an amazing support and very, very patient with me. So thanks to you. If you're listening, I hope you are listening. But the number of times that she knows what's going on before I do. And I think having, like you said, having that community of people who are aware of what's going on and can and just be like, hey, you're kind of acting a bit weird at the moment. Like, yeah, she knows before I know that I'm like, maybe need to start doing some things to try and minimize whatever's happening and pull myself out of wherever I'm going because I don't want to be there.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is, but as much as you learn, your partner learns with you, and they realize those things where hang on, Robin, you're slipping into that space again, and it's. I think that's such an important thing when it comes to relationships, and I always like to refer back to the hunting and the PHing and stuff.
Yes,
is that when you are a professional hunter, there's times that your spouse is going to have to be so patient with you because there are going to be hard moments in this journey. There's going to be months where the bills aren't going to be paid. It's going to be hard months, but if they can be patient with you and understand what you're battling, and trust me, when you ask what's wrong and a professional hunter says no, it's fine. It's never fine. It's never ever fine. That's the most important. That's rule number one. It's never ever fine because we are dealing with a lot because it's a very I'm trying to look for the word, but it's a very degrading feeling to not be able to pay the bills at the end of the day. And unfortunately, as a professional hunter, it's a seasonal gig. You're hunting seasonally, especially as a freelance. And so it's going to be tough, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. That's the thing. I mean, if you can have the mentality, but put one foot in front of the other, there's light at the end of the tunnel. That's what you got to do, and that's what keeps you going forward.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, unless there's anything else you want to talk about this kind of subject that we've just been discussing, we can move on to the next.
No, ready when you are.
Okay. So the last thing which I wanted to pick your brains about is, and I know you've got like a lot of opinions and ideas about this, is trophy hunting, or the term trophy hunting and the world of trophy hunting, and the perhaps like the controversy around it, or controversy. Sure, I don't even know what country I'm from anymore, I keep like, or what the right way to pronounce that word is. So trophy hunting, the term, that maybe the reality in some capacity, it can be a very contentious thing. But you know, what's your position on it? I've heard some podcasts that you've done before, and you have a kind of a clear idea about the world of trophy hunting and what it does for hunting, and how it pushes against what hunting can achieve. So I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, so trophy hunting, the stigma behind it, I think, is partly to blame, or it's us as hunters to blame. But it's an interesting term, and it's one that I get very, very frustrated with, because so many people have a different perspective of what trophy hunting is. And one of the things I learned at my professional hunting school was that always it was never the correct answer to write down, but everyone referred to it is that trophy is the eye of the beholder, right? And in the industry, there's so many different people, there's different hunters, and like I said, each and every single one of them has got an important role to play. You know, from whether you're chasing measurements, to whether you're chasing an experience, to whether you're coming out and shooting a couple of cull animals, there's always going to be a place for it. But I wish the term trophy hunting would kind of fall away, but it's not going to. It's there to stay. So my interpretation of a trophy is that you're representing that animal as best as you possibly can. And what do I mean by that is that a lot of people would want to shoot a 50-inch sable, but a lot of people are happy to shoot the sable that is at the end of its life that's only 37 inches, because that tells a different story. They tell two completely different stories. And I often refer to an animal that doesn't get hunted a lot here, and it's not on many packages, is the mountain rebuck. Now, the mountain rebuck is an animal, to me, it's not beautiful. There's nothing special about it. But the interesting thing about it is that when that animal starts going into its prime from about 7 years old, it becomes sterile, can't breed anymore. But it's still strong enough and healthy enough to fight off all the younger and upcoming rams. So what do? You have to go for the older generation of that species so that they can continue, because they don't do well with predators. I mean, jackal catch them, they don't do well. But that is a trophy to me, is that old animal that looks at you and can tell a story of battle scars and refer to itself as it's traveled the journey, it's been through its lifespan. What a lot of people do, and what a lot of people hold as a trophy is the size of the animal, which is a big misconception. And then I watched I can't remember, Open Season the other day with my daughter.
What's that?
It's an animated season with a animated movie with a deer and a bear, and they become, but the hunter's the bad guy there.
Okay.
So the common depiction in a lot of animated films, I'm sure you're aware of it, is the skull mount on the back wall, and that needs to change. That perception of a hunter being a bad guy needs to change. And I don't know how, and I don't know where, and I don't know what we're going to do to make that perception change, but it needs to. Because it's sad. It's sad that it's already bad enough that we've got to put a value on an animal. But now to classify it as a trophy, it makes it sound even worse. But if you understand the deeper meaning to it, there's a lot more of that to come. So, yeah, my basic, what I depict as a trophy is an old animal, that's walked the journey, that's been through a lot, and that can sit on my wall and represent a species of animals that we fought hard to preserve.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your understanding of a trophy?
Oh, it's so complicated, isn't it? And so, as I said before, I'm but a young whippersnapper within the world of outdoor living and hunting. Well, I guess I was in the outdoors more, but harvesting from nature, be it foraging, fishing, hunting, all those things. And I think at the moment, I don't so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I will get to answer your question. I don't see myself as a trophy hunter because ultimately I think this sounds maybe silly, but I lack the talent. I'm more I'm happy to take an animal if the opportunity arises, and I'm actually also in a bit of a strange position where, because I spend a decent amount of time in South Africa because of my wife being South African and staying with family and hopefully soon having our own place there too, and also living in America, is a strange world where I have a deep freezer in both places that I put meat into, and so through the act of hunting, it is like sustenance hunting in that sense. I'm putting the meat directly there, and I get that direct experience in both countries, which I know is very unusual for anyone normally who's in America who wants to experience hunting in South Africa.
Sure.
And I don't think that should be that they can't have that experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that everyone should have the right, if they want to go and experience, because to be honest, it's amazing. The amount that you can learn, the way that the experience of hunting, being in the wilderness in South Africa is like nothing else I've ever experienced. It's incredible. But I go off track. So it's a complex thing. I don't see myself as a trophy hunter right now. That could change in the future, maybe if my capabilities improve and I think, oh no, I really want to specifically target these animals. Maybe that's something that would happen in the future. But I do like what you're saying. And I think it's very true. The story, the experience, not just of the animal, but of us as hunters, that we go through, the journey to find that animal and be able to make an ethical shot. That has to be the most valuable thing. Yeah. And so I think the tricky thing is, and I can understand why, that when someone who isn't a hunter and hasn't experienced that world comes in and sees a warthog that I'm looking right now, the skull of a warthog, presented, they don't have that experience. They don't understand what that whole process was. And so really, I guess, given the new perspective I have from being in the hunting world for the last however many years, when I see something like that, I see the hard work and the learning and the progression and the experience that someone went through in order to make that moment happen and then enjoy the meat. At least for me.
Being on this journey, I've always associated myself with brands that have got a different perspective in the industry. Treason was one of them, and now one that I'm incredibly passionate about is the taxidermy side.
Yes. Partnering
with Splitting Image, I realized the link between trophy hunting, taxidermy. It was like a 3-phase thing. Hunt, trophy, taxidermy. Put it up on your wall, display it however. It almost became like and I think this is the best analogy I can come up with, so excuse me, it's a bit vulgar, but my dick is bigger than your dick type thing. And that's where the problem was. But being associated with Splitting Image and now, different brands like Scully's and all these different avenues that have come into the industry has afforded these people the opportunity to have an experience hunting and taxidermy. So now we've changed the perspective of what actually trophy hunting is all about, because you can go now essentially and take a management warthog, send it to the taxidermy, it comes back as a skull or as a little figurine, scully or whatever, and you're still displaying that. What's stopping you from having that? What's saying that is a trophy at the end of the day? There's not much. There's just that bad habit, that bad omen that we've injected into this industry of taking away of a lot of what the experience is actually about, and that's hunting. And like you said, I mean, to go out and hunt a female impala, it's not necessarily easier than hunting a male impala or a younger ram. I mean, I've got at my house right now, I've got a beautiful old ram. I mean, he must be 10 years old. His horns are all worn down.
This is a live impala, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's old as shit. he can barely jump a stock fence. So the perfect animal to take. But I'm looking at this animal and I'm saying, but what's stopping me from selling him as a trophy?
Yes.
Where do we draw that line? Because he doesn't have the length. Because his horns are all broken down. They're rounded. So easier management. But somebody's going to come out, hunt that animal. It's not necessarily going to be the easiest hunt, but it's going to hunt that animal and have the exact same experience as a trophy hunter would have, maybe even better.
Yes.
With a better story to tell, just without the measurements.
Yes.
So there's that line now that we've got to try and separate. And again, there's guys out there that, I mean, I've had it. I've got emails that I can show you that they want a 15-inch kudu bull at, you know, come hell or high water, that's what they want to shoot. You know? Never mind the 46-inch kudu bull that's got a better story to tell. You can go through a better process, better experience. So I want people to come out and experience hunting.
Yes.
And not just experience the trophy.
Yeah, ticking boxes. Or
for sure.
Reaching.
Because that impala hanging on the wall there's got a better story to tell than somebody's 27-inch impala back in the United States that shot out of a hectare camp. You know?
Yes.
So
yeah.
So but that's now, we might get into a different topic here, but that's where the industry has taken a very, very dark turn.
Which actually I was going to ask you, and I wonder where you're going, so I shouldn't interrupt you.
No.
This is me learning
Yeah.
someone who knows much better than me. But the way the industry has turned, do you think that that's a product of modern technology, of the way social media, YouTube, even podcasts represent hunting, storytelling? The arc of a good story is a difficult goal. Yeah. We must achieve this difficult goal. And so I can understand why, if, it's an easy tool to pull out of the storytelling toolbox of, this very epically sized animal is very rare, therefore that's a hard thing to do, therefore it's a good story to tell, which is then going to sell more hunting products to people who, you know what I mean?
For sure. And look, I mean, the way we've turned in the hunting industry as far as trophy hunting is concerned is very, very dark, and I'm scared it's gonna infect the industry, because what I was hoping out of COVID times is that I was hoping that the smaller generation, the pop-up shops, the guys that just wanted to make a quick buck out of the booming Trump era, because when Donald Trump came in, I mean, the industry in South Africa took off. It was like wildfire. Everyone, the breeders became outfitters. Everyone had the surplus amount of money. I mean, my very first client when Trump took over was he was a laundromat manager. And my point I'm trying to get at is that the industry boomed. It took off. Okay, so everyone had this abundance of content out there that they could filter through a certain amount and say, okay, well, my Instagram will look good. I mean, I can make an animal look pretty decent.
Yeah.
But I've taken, because now everyone's chasing, oh shit, well I want to shoot that size of springback, I want to shoot that size impala, I want to shoot that size inyala, instead of, well hang on, yeah, well what was the story behind that? You know, like I said, breeders became outfitters overnight.
Yes.
So what that did is it put this genetically powerful amount of species into the industry. And oaks, I mean, guys were shooting. I mean, we were shooting 46, 47-inch sable at one stage, which was 5 years ago was unheard of. And I think my point I'm trying to get at is that we've taken away from storytelling out of hunting. We've taken that away.
Yes.
And now we've just put Instagram, Facebook, and I think that's why it's so important. Like I said, everyone's got a place, but I think our imbalance in that, we've got more trophy hunters now than storytellers, and I think that's where the fluctuation is going to hurt the industry a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. Maybe I might share a couple of these images, which is like a point that really elaborates on what you're saying.
Sure.
But a few years ago, I wouldn't even take a single trophy picture. Coming from a world of communication and marketing, the visual of like a person sat in front of an animal is very hard for someone who doesn't understand the story behind it to interpret that in a way that one might want. So at some point I didn't have any, I wouldn't, and I think, you know, I can understand, because coming from someone who was just taking the step over from someone outside of the world of hunting to going into the world of hunting, I had a very fresh perspective and awareness of like both sides of the story. And obviously coming from understanding communication and all those things. So now I'll occasionally take photos with animals, and it more as like my intention is I want to capture the moment and remember the story. And I usually try and do it in a way which is in my way, respectful to the situation and the moment, you know. But I'm also capturing a lot of the moments along the way as well. However, the thing that's interesting about what you said is I was hunting on the west coast, and there were feral pigs. There's a farm that has a lot of feral pigs, and it's a real pig problem. And so sometimes we would go over there and hunt some pigs to try and reduce the damage that they do on the farm. And I took a pig, and at the time, the guide that I was with was like, "Oh, do you want a photo with the pig?" And I was just in the process of processing it. I was gutting it. And he, I was like, "Yeah, take a photo." And he took a picture, and I'm a big guy, and I'm 6'4", I'm a big oak. And I think someone else took the picture, and I showed the guide, and he was like, no, I need to take a picture for you, because I was like leaning over this animal, and it looked tiny compared to me, you know. It was like, it looked very, very small, and I was like, fine, this is fine, right? And then the thing that was crazy to me was that he then was like, okay, sit here in this dip, we'll put this pig in front, sit a bit further back, put your hand forward on it, and the other photograph, the thing looks like a monster. You know, it's just gained 150 pounds.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing, is that through a bit of clever perspective, like trickery or whatever it is, it's very easy to project a different image in the world of social media of and so when everyone is pumping that stuff into this world of what people are seeing on their feed when they're looking on Instagram, it's not surprising that maybe that's the way things are going, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, now that I've started my own outfitting company, that's my goal. Is John X do it very, very well.
Okay.
They've got a full-time cameraman, and he tries and captures the story as best as possibly can. But now John X has got this perfect balance. They've got great storytelling, fantastic professional hunters, but also conservation ethics of none other. And Cole's model when holding this whole thing is that although 90% of their clients are shooting trophies, if we want to put it in that bracket, the conservation that gets done is of A+ standard, but so too does the story. So you're adding justification to that specific species. And then on the last point on the trophy, the way they depict their trophies and how they tell their professional hunters to take it is to highlight the key factors behind that specific species. Oh, look at that. That kudu's got a beautiful ivory tip at the top. You need to captivate that. You need to put that into your imagery. And I think a difference between a feral hog and a kudu is there's a lot more to the animal that actually highlights what a kudu is all about.
Now you're trying to hurt my feelings.
Sorry, Robert. Yeah, but that's so. There are guys that are going to try and depict that as big as they possibly can, and I used to be like that. Yeah. But there are guys that are also out there to try and highlight the fact. Oh, look at this Inyala's beautiful turn. I mean, as I look at that impala, it's not the biggest impala, but the characteristics behind it are beautiful. The flaring, the ridges on it, so nice. The bottom part of the ridges, they're close together. Highlights good age, there's so much of that you can capture in a photo.
Yes.
And that's what we should be doing instead of trying to make it look
massive.
Bit
of context, we are sat in a living room with an impala on the wall.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep referring to it.
No,
it's in the line of sight.
A skull on the wall. Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. It's true, and
but I think what you're doing and what I thrive to do and strive to do out in the bush is trying to tell that story. So now when I have clients over, I mean, especially on my YouTube channel, I went up to the Snoeberg Mountains. It's just that in its own has got such a history behind it, with the settlers moving over that mountain range, back out in the 18 or 1750s, whenever it was. But being able to afford that opportunity on a backpack to hunt a fall rhubarc. My fall rhubarc wasn't the biggest, but the story behind it, I managed to tell and captivate it. Now it's probably one of my best conversation pieces I have. So I think what you guys are doing, is captivating that story along the way is so important into hunting now. Because what it will do now is it will try and separate that gap that we've got between a lot of trophy hunters and storytellers. I think that's important. We need more storytellers than trophy hunters.
Yeah, I mean, I try to live my life in a way where I'm enjoying things in the moment versus always thinking about the goal, which I think it's an ideology which probably most people aim to do.
Yeah.
But there is a tough side as well, that when out hunting in the veld, in the bush, I'm constantly getting distracted by all sorts of amazing stuff that's out there. And I've had hunting buddies who are like, should we go chasing these eland now?
Yeah,
I'm like, but look at these baby ostriches.
Yeah.
Like, they are pretty cute now, aren't they? Like,
I mean, that's in the industry, as a professional hunter, I'm very fortunate to actually have individuals like yourself that have come out in the past. I mean, I'll never forget it. It was last year actually, and because you're hunting so much, right? As a professional hunter, you're hunting constantly, so you can very easily be accustomed to what your surroundings are, because you see it on a daily basis. You see the orange sunset 1,000 times. You see the beautiful sunrises. You see all of that sort of shit. And it's so important to come back down to earth in moments on a hunt, because your guest next to you not only hasn't seen that before, but it's also important to appreciate those small things. And last year I had a lady by the name of Sharon. Her son was hunting with me, Chris, and she stopped me. She's like, "Whoa!" And to the right of us there was this little bird called a hoopoe. Beautiful little bird. Yeah, it's got a mohawk and it's got all these little, it looks like a zebra on the back with a big white, glowing orange head. Seen hundreds of them. I mean, I've got 40 nests outside my house. So I've seen these things on a constant basis. And she got out and she's got a little smartphone and she's trying to take photos of this thing. And I just looked how this lady looked at this bird and how she was just so grateful to be in that moment, appreciate that. And it transcended to me as like, well, maybe that's a trophy.
Yeah.
That's what you got to look at. That story behind our safari that time was made by a lady stopping me, jumping out of my pickup, whipping out her phone, and appreciating that small bird. So, like I said, trophy hunting, there's a place for it, but we need more place for storytellers, and that's what I enjoy about the hunting industry. It allows me, and podcasting is the same. I get to tell my story, and people, they're not forced to listen to it, but if you're building a brand and they enjoy you as a brand, they're going to listen to it. So it's always nice.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. I think it's enjoying the journey. It's a really nice thought that you just made there about the fact that there are trophies all around us all the time.
Yeah.
And if you want to use that language, that's the thing. Maybe we shouldn't be using that language. We don't want people to be using the language of trophy hunting. But there are these amazing nuggets, these amazing moments happening all the time. And even there is a type of bird called the go-away bird. I don't know the main name for it. All I know it's called the go-away bird. And I experienced this bird while sitting. I don't sit in hides very often. I'm usually too restless and I go walk and stalk and go off in the bush. But I was sat in this hide for a moment and then was inundated with about 6 of these birds. And they're this kind of funny white, almost like a parrot-looking bird with a plumy white feathers on their head, right? And this thing looked at me, flew in, looked at me, and made this noise, this it's just such a loud, distinctive noise. And more flew in, and there's these 5 or 6 birds come in, and the guide who I was with explained that this is actually a very bad thing. Because it's called the go-away bird because they are the giveaway, the birds that are the signaler of that there are predators in the area and everything needs to get up or get their heads up and look around or get out of there. And after a while, initially perhaps I was a little bit annoyed because it's like, oh, we're not trying to achieve our goal, but it was so ridiculous. Yeah. This constant just looking down on us with these funny cocked heads that I just had to enjoy that moment, And it may not have been what we set out for in the first place, but I will always remember the go-away birds.
In that, I think if on that point, I mean, if I said that the industry took a dark turn, is that the outfitters put so much pressure on these professional hunters to achieve their goals out there, not worry about the animal quality, but make sure that you finish the package so that we can get as much income as possibly we can out of that particular hunter. The professional hunters never enjoyed the job as much as what they should have.
Yes.
I'll never forget, I was sitting in a blue darker blind, and same, very, very much similar story. The Nausna Leary, beautiful bird. Blues and greens, a magnificent bird. And it's actually on one of my, it will be launched now on one of my YouTube episodes. It came in and it just makes this unbelievable loud screeching noise. And here I am videoing this magnificent bird, and we get out of the blind, unsuccessful, and we walk up to the lodge at the time, and the outfitter, he's pressuring, did you get it? No, but yes, you need to see this bird over. I don't care about the bird, just make sure you get the shot in, and why aren't these darker coming in like we've planned it and everything. And it took a lot away out of that experience for myself. I don't know what it did to the hunter, but at the time it took away a lot of the experience. And the next time we went and sat in the blind, you're so focused, you can't take anything else in around you. It takes away from that experience.
Yeah.
So the story now is missing a few chapters, which is sad, because we landed up shooting a beautiful blue darker at the end of it, but we're missing a few pages now, which is very, very frustrating. But in essence, that's where the dark side of the industry took, is that our outfitters are putting so much pressure onto our professional hunters to complete these packages because they want to make as much money as they possibly can. And I'm not saying all outfitters, and that's why I say John X is a perfect example of this magnificent balance that they've integrated into their ecosystem. But majority of the outfitters out there are putting this unnecessary pressure on these professional hunters, and they'll look back in a couple of years and not have a full storybook. They're going to have a few chapters missing, and that's the sad part of the industry. And I wish that will go away, and that's why I say that balance needs to come back.
Maybe it will. I feel hopeful in the sense that, and this is utterly my own perception. I don't have statistics to justify this. Yeah. It's maybe my own personal experience. Coming from a more technology young environment, I'm not that young, but maybe. Yeah. But being someone who didn't grow up with hunting, that transition going over and coming into the world of hunting and being fresh to it and learning everything anew rather than being like long traditional generational handed down. I think that has to, if that's happening, because surely as an industry, for it to grow, it has to be appealing to younger people who aren't coming from a long history of hunting. So hopefully with that will come a new perspective, a different way of looking at things. And so I'm hopeful that could be what happens, but we'll have to see. I've got one other little... Oh, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say on that point, the sad thing, I'm very optimistic about the industry, and I think we're in a good trajectory. But we human beings, and competition always plays, so there's always going to be those guys that are always going to want the bigger kudu, the bigger sable. They're always going to be that. But if we can divert that attention, for instance, now I'm focusing a lot on the Tiny 10 because I know it's a journey for the Tiny 10. It's the experience behind the Tiny 10 that's the trophy and not the animal. I mean, the animal's always fantastic, but it's the journey how you got there, because there are just so many different species. And I think going forward, with yourself and guys that have that storytelling ability and perspective on it, it's very, very important for industry. So I agree with you. I'm very optimistic, but I think there's always just going to be those competition. My dick's bigger than your dick type.
So one other little story. See, as I couldn't resist the story.
Yeah.
But this is more like a connection that through thinking about our podcast that we were going to do, and thinking about trophy hunting and the contentiousness which we've talked about. Thanks for sharing all your thoughts with that. One thing that kind of popped in my mind is I did have a very good conversation a while ago in one of my previous episodes with a guy from the TV show Alone. And there's a guy whose name, he's actually South African, but he lives in the US now. His name's Joel van der Loon, or Van der Loon, I think maybe Americans would pronounce it. And he spends a lot of time with the Hadza tribe up in Tanzania, I believe it is. And the stuff that he's making on YouTube is very fascinating to me because he's going off to an area where people have had very little interaction with like the modern world, as minimal as possible, and they are true hunter-gatherers, still living in small groups of 15 people, running around and shooting birds out of trees and living this very simple life without much technology involved. There's occasional moments of technology, but the thing that I thought was interesting is that this is as close a representation of kind of original man as we can see now. I'm assuming, this is my own assumption. And the thing I noticed is that a lot of the people there, they are carrying on their bodies the hides of animals that they have successfully hunted, animals of note, stories, moments that they will retell many, many times again and again at the fire when they are at night eating whatever they've managed to find, be it plants or animals during the day. And so actually I think, although it's got a bad reputation, and I think there are bad interpretations and there are people who take trophy hunting in a poor direction where they are just seeking out a giant animal and they're just flying in, shooting an animal in a tiny enclosed space. Definitely, I'm not on board with that. However, the idea of a trophy in whatever form it may be has existed from the beginning of time, and in a way it's some of the most cherished items that it seems like the Hadza people have are those things that they wear with them every day, because it is ingrained in like who they are at its core.
But again, it's depicted differently, right? And I don't want to interrupt you, but you can look at that tribe. You can look at the Messiah, how they separate their trophy hunting. I mean, they don't believe in hunting to eat and stuff. They eat their cattle, but they hunt lion. To become a man, you have to hunt a lion.
Okay.
But then on the southern perspective of things, I mean, I interviewed a guy, Stephen Townley Bassett, fantastic gentleman and incredibly knowledgeable. He analysed all the Bushman paintings in the southern tip, from the Drakensberg right up to the Western Cape. They depicted in drawings, right? So trophy hunting was depicted in drawings, but they made this somewhat ceremonial thing about it. And it will always boil down to storytelling, right? So the tribe you're talking about, there's a story behind every single one of those skins.
Yes.
The cave paintings, there's a story behind. The Messiah, I've got a story behind there. And that's what that's the most important thing. And I hope, and now so like touching on the social media side of things, it can do so much damage, but there's so much good that can come from this. With your podcast, with mine, with a couple of other guys, I mean, depicting the industry in a storytelling fashion is probably one of our most important things, and I think that's what can help us go forward in sharing our industry in such a positive light. Because whether you like it or not, whether you believe in hunting or not, it's a primal instinct that was embellished in you many through genetics, it's been on this earth since the start of time.
Yeah.
And it's up to us now to look after it, number one, and number two, we've got to manage it as such, and I just wish things were different.
Well, hopefully they can improve.
I'm sure they will, and like I said, I mean, it gives me great hope, and like I said, I've always been an optimist, and when I sit here and chatting to you and how you light up about your storytelling with your experiences that you've had, although it's only been 5 years, I mean, it's a real experience. It makes me happy, and that's all I can ask for.
Well, the feeling's mutual, man. Thank you for sharing your stories today, Dylan. Cool. Amazing. Thank you for sharing so much time, and hopefully we can talk again in the future. Yeah. I'd love to hear more stories and more thoughts around the industry and all that stuff. It's been absolutely fantastic.
No, Robin, thanks so much. I mean, the opportunity is always nice to sit on this side of the podcast. But I would love to have you on mine, and we can take this conversation further and just dive into different ways. I think our platforms have become so important, regardless, across the board. Who's ever starting or has had platforms, it's always nice to see how guys are so enthusiastic about it, and it's awesome. I love the enthusiasm, so well done firstly, and secondly I can only wish you well, and I look forward to a couple more exciting adventures ahead with us.
Amazing. Well, until next time.
Thanks, Rory. Appreciate it.
Right, ladies and gents, that wraps up another episode. Thanks again to Dylan. I know he's a busy man, so it is appreciated. You can find Dylan at PH Journals on Instagram. You can check out his outfitters at utandosafaris.com. It's maybe a bit of a funny spelling, so just check out the show notes if you're looking for a link. And you can listen to the PH Journals podcast wherever you like to forage for podcasts. I also want to give a big thank you to everyone listening along on this journey. It's always nice to exchange thoughts and ideas with someone who's as open and passionate about what they do and think as Dylan. Hopefully, you all enjoyed it as much as me. Now, I've already been lucky enough to get some fantastic guests on the show, and there's plenty more to come too. If you're excited about what you've been hearing, then you could do me an absolute solid and spread the word. Share this episode or the Wild Dispatch in general with your pals, and I will thank you until the cows come home. That's all for now. Thanks again, and until next time.